My hands are not what they used to be. My joints swell in the mornings, especially when it rains, and in South Haven it rains more often than I'd like. 76 is no joke. But I still carefully slice carrots for the casserole, trying to make the pieces even, like those cooking shows my daughter Audrey likes to watch. She never cooks on her own, though I've tried to teach her. She says she doesn't have time. I glance at the clock 5:15. Noel and Sylvia will be home from school soon, and I need to have dinner ready by 6 when Lawrence, my son-in-law, gets home from work. He can't stand waiting. It's one of the many things he can't stand. My home is a 20-minute walk from here, a small but cozy cottage on Elm Street left over from Thomas. My late husband was a school head teacher, not a godly position, but we lived decently. For 30 years, I taught chemistry at South Haven High School, and Thomas retired 2 years ahead of me. We had planned to travel, never been to France, though we had always dreamed of it. But a heart attack took him suddenly, 3 months after I retired, 6 years ago. Sometimes it seems like yesterday, and sometimes it seems like another life. Grandma, we're home! Sylvia's sonorous voice echoed through the house, and I smiled involuntarily. My 10-year-old granddaughter flies into the kitchen, dropping her school bag on the floor. Behind her, more discreetly, Noel enters. At 12, he's already trying to seem grown up, straightening his back, speaking in a low voice. It's funny to watch him copy his father's gestures. Hang up your coats and wash your hands, I say, wiping my hands on my apron. How was school? Fine. Noel shrugs, and Sylvia starts talking about some conflict with a classmate over a seat at the lunch table. I nod, half listening, and put the casserole dish into the baking dish. Sylvia suddenly interrupts. Grandma, why are your hands shaking so much? I look at my hands. Indeed, a slight tremor. It's nothing new, but the children have started to notice it. It's called age-related tremors, honey. As you get older, certain parts of your body start to work a little differently. Daddy says you're going to be useless soon, Noelle says, looking at her phone. I freeze, feeling something inside me clench. Years of teaching have taught me to save face in any situation, but every time my grandchildren repeat Lawrence's words, it hurts. Your dad's just kidding, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Why don't you tell me what you have for tomorrow? After we finish our homework, Sylvia was struggling with fraction multiplication and Noel was writing a report on the Civil War. I finished dinner. Chicken and vegetable casserole, green salad, and apple pie for dessert are simple meals, but hearty. Lawrence likes traditional food, no gimmicks, as he puts it. The sound of the car pulling up makes the children come to life. Daddy's here! Sylvia runs to the door and Noel follows more discreetly. I quickly check that everything is in order on the table. Lawrence has no tolerance for clutter and won't miss an opportunity to point it out, especially if the mess was left by me. Home already, my little champions? Lawrence's voice echoes down the hall. I hear him hugging the children, his footsteps heading for the kitchen. Here comes our domestic helper. Lawrence Weymouth appears in the doorway, a tall man in his mid-40s with bald spots that he carefully disguises by slicking his hair to the side. He is well-dressed, as always, a suit with an impeccably ironed shirt. Exeter Insurance appraisers have to look presentable. Good evening, Lawrence, I say. Dinner is almost ready. Audrey's not back yet? She got held up at work. He tosses his briefcase carelessly onto a chair. What are we having tonight? Chicken casserole with vegetables and... Again? He wrinkles his nose. We had that last week. Couldn't you think of something more interesting? Last time it was beef casserole, I object quietly. And I asked Audrey what to make and she said, Okay. Lawrence waved me away. It must be hard to remember things like that at your age. It's a good thing you can still do something. It's his usual manner. Careless remarks that at first glance seem just a little rude, but in fact each one is like a little jab. In 10 years of marriage to my daughter, he has honed this skill to perfection. I don't answer, just put the plates on the table. The kids are already seated, waiting. I put their food on, then Lawrence's, then myself last. Did you wash your hands? I ask the children. Yes, Grandma, Sylvia says, but I notice Noel rolling his eyes, just like his father. Agatha, did you remember about tomorrow? Lawrence asks, not looking up from his plate. Tomorrow? I try to remember what he's talking about. See, I told you, he says to Noel. Grandma's already forgetting everything. Then back to me. Tomorrow is my company banquet. I'm getting a promotion, remember? We talked about it last week. Audrey needs you to come sit with the kids during the event. Of course I remember. I was just hoping they'd hire a nanny like they usually do for special occasions. Lawrence often mentioned that this would be a big night for him, the promotion to team leader he'd been seeking for so long. Of course I remember, I say. What time should I be there? 6 o'clock. And don't be late. He sends another bite of casserole into his mouth. The kids will need to be dressed appropriately. It's a big event. At the Riverview restaurant. The restaurant? I ask in surprise. I thought I was going to stay home with them. Lawrence sighs as if explaining something very simple to a very stupid person. Agatha, this is a family event. The children must be present, but someone has to watch them while Audrey and I socialize with important people. The normal babysitter we usually hire is out sick. Someone needs to work as a free maid, he smirks as if he's said something witty. Free maid. One of his favorite definitions for me. The first time he said it, I was so shocked I couldn't find a response. Then he started saying it more and more often, seeing that I didn't fight back. First behind my back, then to my face, and now in front of the kids. Okay, I said. I'll be there at 6. And don't forget to wear something decent, he adds. Don't embarrass us with your old lady outfits. I look at my clothes, a simple blouse and pants, nothing fancy but clean and tidy. When I was younger, I loved bright colors, but over the years my closet has become more subdued. Partly because of the budget, the pension isn't that great, partly because brightly colored clothes on older women often invite ridicule, especially from the likes of Lawrence. I have a dark blue dress, I say. I think it will do. Unless it's from the last century, Lawrence snorts. Daddy, can I wear my new dress tomorrow? Sylvia intervenes. The conversation shifts to the children and their outfits, and I'm relieved. When Lawrence's attention isn't on me, it's easier to breathe. After dinner, I do the dishes while Lawrence watches TV with the kids. Around 8, Audrey returns, tired, with circles under her eyes. My only daughter looks like me when I was young. The same brown hair, although mine has long since turned gray. The same gray eyes. But she doesn't have the liveliness that I had. She'd always been quiet, but she'd gotten even quieter since she'd gotten married. Hi, Mom. She kisses me on the cheek. Thank you for watching the kids and for dinner. You're welcome, dear, I say. How was work? Busy, she sighs. Quarterly report. You remember tomorrow, don't you? Yes, Lawrence reminded me. I'll be there at 6. Audrey looks guilty. I'm sorry to have to ask you. We were going to hire Patricia, but she came down with the flu. It's all right, I assure him. I'm happy to help. It's true. No matter what, I love my grandchildren and I want to be a part of their lives, even if it means putting up with Lawrence. It's late. I have to go home, I say, taking off my apron. Sylvia has a math test in the morning. We've done fractions, but she's still having trouble with multiplication. Thank you, Mom. You're a real lifesaver. Audrey hugs me. She's half a head shorter than me, and when she hugs me, she always reminds me of myself as a child. I gather my things and say goodbye to the kids. Lawrence just nods, keeping his eyes on the TV. Stepping outside, I take a deep breath of the cool evening air. The 20-minute walk home is my only regular exercise. The doctor says I'm in good shape for my age. Except your blood pressure is elevated, but that's normal at your age, he always adds. As if after 70, any health problems become normal and not worth mentioning. My house greets me with silence. After my daughter's noisy house, this silence sometimes feels like a blessing and sometimes like a curse. Today, for some reason, it's the latter. I turn on the radio, an old habit that helps create the illusion of someone else's presence. Thomas loved classical music. I prefer conversational programs more. Voices of people discussing books, politics, life, anything to fill the void. As I get ready for bed, I think about tomorrow's banquet. I have to find the dark blue dress, see if it needs ironing. It's conservative enough not to displease Lawrence, but it makes me look dignified. I catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Wrinkles, gray hair pulled back into a neat bun. The eyes are still the same, gray like Audrey's. Only the look is different. Tired. Free Maid, Lawrence's voice sounds in my head. When and how did I let this happen? When did I let my son-in-law treat me like a servant? When did I accept that my daughter wouldn't stand up for me? The answers to these questions don't come. I turn off the light and go to bed. Tomorrow is a big day for Lawrence, and probably for me too, though I don't know it yet. The morning began with a phone call. I was just making tea when the old machine that Thomas had installed back in the 90s rang. Amazingly, it still worked, unlike a lot of modern things. Mom, could you pick up Sylvia from school today? She has a sporting event that ends early and I can't get off work. Audrey's voice sounded guilty. Of course, dear, I answered without even thinking. When your only daughter asks for help, how can you say no? What time? 2 o'clock and Mom, thank you. As I hung up the phone, I looked at the calendar, where the red circle marked tonight's Lawrence banquet. So I'll be spending the day with my grandchildren. Well, that's fine with me, even if it's not a happy occasion. 15 years ago, when Audrey first brought Lawrence to meet us, he seemed a decent young man to Thomas and me, self-confident, with a good job at a prestigious insurance company. Audrey was working there as a secretary at the time, and it was obvious how much she admired him. You told me so much about your parents that I had to meet them, he said, handing me a bouquet of flowers. Educators are the most respected people in society. You shape the future. Thomas whispered to me later, it's a little sweet, but the kid's trying. We laughed, if only we'd known. The first years of their marriage seemed happy enough. Lawrence got a promotion, they bought a house, Noel was born. Audrey was radiant with happiness, although I noticed that she began to socialize less with her friends, focusing entirely on her husband and child. It seemed normal to me at the time. I was the same way myself after Audrey was born. Things started to change about 3 years later. When Audrey was pregnant with Sylvia, Lawrence insisted that she leave work completely. The children need their mother at home, he declared during a family dinner. Besides, with my salary, we'll do just fine. Thomas was alarmed. My husband had always believed that a woman should have her own income, no matter how small. It's a matter of respect and equality in the family, he often said. That's probably why our marriage was so strong. We were always partners, not master and maid. Audrey can always go back to work when the children are older, Thomas said then. But it's up to you, of course. Lawrence smiled his trademark smile, a slightly condescending smile, as if he were talking to old-fashioned people who didn't understand modern life. Of course, if Audrey wants to, he said, but I heard something in his tone that made me wary, as if he'd already made up his mind. Thomas noticed it too. That evening when we were alone, he said, I don't like that guy, too controlling. Maybe he's just looking out for his family. I tried to justify my son-in-law. That's what a lot of men think these days. No, Agatha, it's not about caring. Did you see Audrey's face? She didn't even voice her opinion. That's not like our daughter. He was right. Audrey was always quiet, but she had her own opinions. In high school, she was head of the debate club. In college, she wrote incisive articles for the student newspaper. But around Lawrence, she seemed to shrink to become his shadow. After the birth of Sylvia, Audrey completely immersed in motherhood. The first 3 years were particularly difficult. 2 small children required all her attention. Thomas and I helped as much as we could, but Lawrence was working late more and more often, leaving all the household chores to his wife. When Sylvia turned 3, Audrey started talking about going back to work. I found a good kindergarten, she said over Sunday lunch at our house. And I thought maybe I could go back to Exeter. There was just a vacancy in the human resources department there. Lawrence looked at her as if she'd said something stupid. Darling, you've been out of work for 5 years. What human resources? You don't even know the new systems. I could learn, Audrey objected quietly. Take a course. Courses take money, Lawrence cut him off. Besides, who's going to pick up the kids from daycare? Do you have any idea how much a full-time nanny costs? Thomas couldn't take it anymore. Agatha and I could help with the kids. We're both retired, we have plenty of time. Lawrence looked at her husband with undisguised irritation. No offense, Thomas, but at your age it's hard to keep up with active children, especially Noel, he's so fidgety. My husband crimsoned, but he held back. He was 67 then, and he was in great shape. Every morning ran 5 kilometers, worked in the garden. Lawrence's hint of his infirmity was simply insulting. In the end, Audrey still went to work, but not in Exeter Insurance, but in a small construction company where she was offered the position of assistant accountant with a minimum wage. Lawrence condescendingly allowed her to do so, emphasizing that he would still cover the family's basic expenses. A year after that, Thomas died. The heart attack came on suddenly while he was working in the garden. The doctors said he died instantly, without agony. It was the only thing that comforted me during those dark days. Lawrence showed himself at the funeral from an unexpected side. He was attentive, did the organizing, supported a crying Audrey. I was grateful to him. Then I did not realize that it was just part of his public image. A caring family man, a model son-in-law. After Thomas died, I fell into a deep depression. The house we had lived in for almost 40 years suddenly became huge and empty. I began to spend more and more time at my daughter's house helping with the children. Lawrence didn't mind at first. The free babysitting was good for him. About a year after Thomas died, I first noticed Lawrence talking about me to the kids. I went into the nursery to get some dirty cups and heard his voice from the next room. Grandma forgot to water the flowers again and they withered. You see, children, that's what happens when you get old. Your brains stop working. But Grandma is smart, said little Noel. She knows all about chemistry and can do cool experiments. Ha! Lawrence snorted. Knowing chemistry and teaching kids in school is not a sign of intelligence. Look at her worked all her life for pennies, and what does she have? A small house, an old car that's always breaking down. I'm an insurance adjuster. I have a real career. I make real money. I froze, holding the cups in my hands, unable to believe my ears. Everything inside was boiling with anger and resentment, but I couldn't find the strength to go in and tell him what I thought. Somehow I was afraid it would only make things worse. What if Lawrence forbade me to see my grandchildren at all? From then on, I began to notice more and more of these moments. When Lawrence thought I wasn't around, he was always making comments about me. Grandma bought the wrong milk again. She's got a bad memory. Don't take your grandmother's example. She's a loser. She's worked in school all her life and has achieved nothing but wrinkles and arthritis. If it weren't for our kindness, Grandma would have to live in a nursing home. It's good that she has us, isn't it? I didn't know what to do. Should I talk to Audrey? But she seemed completely submissive to her husband, afraid of his anger. Besides, if I told her I'd overheard their conversations, wouldn't it look like I was spying on their family? And then the direct remarks in my presence began. Minor ones at first, that could be taken as a joke if you tried hard enough. Then they got more and more explicit. Agatha, you put the plates on the wrong shelf again. At your age, you should have learned the basics by now. You're walking like a turtle. We're going to be late because of you. That blouse makes you look old, although in your case, nothing's going to help. Audrey pretended not to hear me every time. Sometimes she'd give me a guilty look, but she never intervened. Sometimes I thought she even agreed with him. The children quickly adopted their father's manner, especially Noel. I remember one time he refused to eat the soup I made. Grandma's food is bad, he said. Daddy says she can't cook. My heart ached. Thomas always praised my cooking. I knew I was a good cook. My students in the cooking class I ran after school always raved about my dishes. Noel, I said sternly, trying to keep my voice from shaking, your grandfather thought I was a great cook, and your mom grew up on my food and never complained. But Daddy says, don't argue with your grandmother, Audrey intervened, giving her son a stern look. Eat what you're given. That moment was a rare glimpse of the old Audrey, the one who had her own opinions. But those moments were becoming fewer and fewer. My daughter seemed to melt into her husband's shadow. I tried to talk to her. One day, when Lawrence wasn't home, I asked her bluntly, Audrey, are you happy with him? She was silent for a long time, looking out the window at the children playing in the yard. He's a good father, she said at last. Provides for his family, never raises a hand. That doesn't answer my question. Mom, she turned to me, and I could see the weariness in her eyes. Not everyone can have a marriage like you and Dad. You were the exception. It's different for most people. But he treats you disrespectfully. He's disrespectful to me, too. He's just straightforward, she defended her husband. And he works hard. He's tired. He has a responsible job. He's under a lot of pressure. That's no excuse for rudeness, I said firmly. Mom, please. In her voice, there were pleading notes. Don't start. We're doing fine. The kids are happy. We have a nice house, stability. What more do you need? Respect, I wanted to shout. Love, partnership. But I didn't. She looked at me like she was afraid I'd ruin everything. Okay, I said after a pause. But know that I'm always on your side, no matter what happens. After that conversation, I began to notice that Lawrence had stepped up his campaign against me. It was as if he felt threatened. He called me free maid and old bag more and more often, especially when we were alone, without witnesses. One day, while I was cooking dinner, he came up behind me and said quietly so the children wouldn't hear, You know, Agatha, you should be grateful to me for letting you be part of our family. A lot of men would have sent a mother-in-law like that to a nursing home a long time ago. I turned around, still holding the vegetable slicer in my hand. What did you say? He smiled, but his eyes remained cold. Just a reminder that your position here depends on my goodwill. I allow you to see your grandchildren. I allow you to come to our home. But you must know your place. My place? I felt the color rush to my face. What do you think it is? A free maid, he said it with such pleasure that I shuddered. You wash, cook, babysit when we need you and stay out of our business. It's the perfect arrangement, don't you think? I stared at him, not believing my ears. How could a man be so insensitive? So cruel? Does Audrey know you think that? I asked, trying to remain calm. Audrey? He grinned. Audrey does what I say. Always has and always will. She knows she's nothing without me. She's my daughter and a wonderful person, I said, feeling my hands shake with anger. She can do a lot of things. Of course she can. He patted me on the shoulder, the way one patronizes a child. That's why she has such a brilliant career as an accounting assistant for a third-rate construction company. Before I could answer, Sylvia came running into the kitchen. Daddy, Noel won't let me watch the cartoon. Lawrence switched instantly, his face taking on the expression of a concerned father. Coming, princess, he said, smiling at his daughter. Daddy will sort it out. He walked away, leaving me standing with the knife in my hand, seething with impotent rage. That night, back home, I sat in the dark for a long time, remembering the conversation with Lawrence. A free maid. That's what I had become in his eyes, and probably in his daughter's eyes, too. The worst of it was that I had let it happen. Out of love for my daughter and grandchildren, I'd endured the humiliation, allowed my son-in-law to trample on my dignity. What would Thomas say if he saw what his proud, independent wife had become? I remembered how once, early in our marriage, when I was questioning whether I should continue working at school or whether I should devote myself to my home and child, Thomas had said, Agatha, never let anyone, not even me, decide who you are and what you are worth. Your dignity is your most valuable asset. Don't trade it for anything. Wise Thomas. It's a shame he's not around. He would know what to do. But I am alone. And now I have to go to this banquet where Lawrence will get his promotion and once again play the role of the dutiful mother-in-law who knows her place. Not this time, I thought suddenly. Something inside me had changed since that conversation in the kitchen. Something had broken, or on the contrary, healed. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow, but I was sure I wouldn't take the insult silently anymore, even if it meant losing the opportunity to see my grandchildren, even if it shattered the illusion of family well-being that Audrey worked so hard to maintain. It's time to remember who I am. Agatha Bonner, chemistry teacher of 30 years. A woman who has educated generations of this town's children. Wife of Thomas Bonner, who loved and respected me until the last day of his life. Not a free maid. At 6 o'clock sharp, I rang the doorbell at my daughter's house. My dark blue dress was carefully ironed, my hair neatly coiled, a modest string of pearls around my neck, a gift from Thomas for our 30th anniversary. I was determined to look dignified, no matter what happened tonight. The door was opened by Lawrence, already in a suit with a bow tie. He gave me a critical look. At least you're not late, he muttered instead of greeting me. The kids are almost ready and Audrey's finishing up her makeup. We should be at the Riverview by 7. Hello, Lawrence, I said quietly, walking into the house. It's good to see you too. He ignored my irony. The children must be supervised all evening, no running between tables, no whimsy. This is an important event for my career. I know how to babysit, I replied. I've raised my daughter and helped with my grandchildren since they were born. Lawrence wrinkled his nose. Just do what you have to do. No comment. At that moment, Audrey came out into the lobby wearing an elegant black dress, which I saw for the first time. She looked beautiful, but tense. Mom, you made it, she pecked my cheek. Thank you, the kids are almost ready. Noel doesn't want to wear a tie. I'll talk to him, I said. 20 minutes later, we were in the car. Lawrence drove, constantly glancing at his watch. Audrey sat next to him, nervously checking something on her phone. The kids and I were in the back seat. Grandma, why are we going to the restaurant? Sylvia asked, smoothing the ruffles on her pink dress. Your father has a big night out, I explained. He's been promoted at work, and there's going to be an official award tonight. Daddy's going to be the boss? The girl's eyes widened. Team leader, Noel corrected her with an important look. That means he'll have his own team and more money. And we can go to Disneyland? Sylvia asked immediately. Lawrence glanced in the rearview mirror. We'll see, princess. If you behave yourself today. Riverview was the most expensive restaurant in South Haven, located on the riverbank. I'd only been here a couple times, Thomas's 50th birthday party and our 40th wedding anniversary. The memories made my heart clench. Inside, the restaurant had changed. It was more modern, with a minimalist design. The large hall was decorated with Exeter Insurance logos, with tables arranged in a P shape. In the center was a small stage with a microphone. Lawrence, Audrey, a tall man with graying hair on his temples approached us. Glad you could make it, minus Mr. Kingsley. Lawrence shook his hand with a respectful smile. May I introduce my mother-in-law, Agatha Bonner. She'll be watching the children today. Randall Kingsley gave me a polite nod, but it was obvious that I was just a servant to him. It's a pleasure, Mrs. Bonner. We've prepared a special table for the children in the far corner. It's quieter there. Jessica will show you out. A young girl in a restaurant uniform led us to a small table in the corner of the hall, away from the main group. Although the table was set as nicely as the others, its location made our status clear. We are not part of the party, we are servants. Grandma, I want to sit with Mommy and Daddy, Sylvia whined as we settled in. We'll be more comfortable here, sweetie, I said. Look at the pretty napkins they gave you. Audrey came up to us a few minutes later. Are you okay here? She asked anxiously. I asked for closer seating, but Lawrence said the children would be bored at the grown-up table. It's fine, dear, I assured her. Go mingle with the guests. We'll manage. She smiled nervously and returned to her husband, who stood surrounded by colleagues, talking animatedly. The waiters began serving appetizers. A young girl with a tray came to our table. We have a special menu for children, she said, handing out colorful cards. And for you, ma'am? The same as for everyone else, please, I replied. Noel and Sylvia quickly selected the children's specials, fries and chicken nuggets. I ordered a light salad, although there were many tempting options on the menu. For some reason, I felt like I should limit myself, as if I didn't have the right to enjoy the evening equally with the other guests. Gradually, the room filled up. Lawrence went from group to group, shaking hands, laughing at jokes. Audrey followed him like a shadow, smiling when necessary but rarely entering into conversation. Look at Daddy, Noel said proudly. Everyone wants to talk to him. I watched my son-in-law. He really knew how to make an impression, confident, charismatic, with a practiced smile. At times like this, I understood why Audrey had fallen in love with him and why she still stayed with him no matter what. Around 8 p.m., the formal presentations began. Randall Kingsley took the stage and began a speech about the company's accomplishments over the past year. The children fidgeted. They were getting bored. Grandma, I'm thirsty, Sylvia whispered. I looked around. There were only glasses of juice on the table, which the children had already drunk. I'll get you some water, I said, standing up. Sit here. I'll be right back. I headed for the bar at the far end of the room. Kingsley's speech was still going on, and all eyes were on the stage. As I walked past the main tables, I noticed Lawrence sitting next to the boss. Several empty champagne glasses were already in front of him. The bartender filled 2 glasses with water, and I turned around to go back to the kids. At that moment, Randall Kingsley announced, "And now I am proud to introduce our new head of strategic underwriting, Lawrence Weymouth." Applause erupted. Lawrence stood up and walked towards the stage, swaying slightly as the champagne began to take effect. He accepted the award, shook Kingsley's hand, and began to speak into the microphone about his gratitude to the company and the team. I had almost reached our table when Lawrence finished his speech and came down from the stage. He spotted me and suddenly, loud enough for the whole room to hear, shouted, "Hey, free Maid! Bring me and Randall some wine and hurry up! You must be useful for something at your age." The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I froze with 2 glasses of water in my hands, feeling the blood rush to my face. Usually at times like this, I tried to be invisible. I lowered my eyes, hurried to do what I was told, so as not to attract attention. But today something was different. Instead of the usual shame, I felt anger, pure, righteous anger that rose from within like a wave. I straightened, lifted my chin, and spoke loudly, clearly. "Lawrence, I'm a teacher who has raised 2 generations of children in this town, including your boss's son Randall, who is standing next to you right now. By the way, hello Winston." I nodded to the young man standing next to Kingsley. "It's nice to see that you've grown into a decent man, unlike some." Winston Kingsley, whom I recognized despite the years that had passed, stared at me in amazement. "Mrs. Bonner?" he said incredulously. "You were my high school chemistry teacher." I turned to Randall, who was looking at me with growing interest. "Your son was one of my best students. And as for the wine, I'm afraid Mr. Weymouth mistook me for a waiter, probably from excitement." Randall Kingsley looked from me to his son, then to Lawrence, who turned pale and froze with his mouth open. "Mrs. Bonner," he said, stepping forward. "Winston has often spoken of you. You inspired him to enter the chemistry department. He still has his school project that he did under your supervision? Something to do with crystals, if I'm not mistaken?" "Growing copper sulfate crystals," Winston confirmed with a smile. "I won first place in the county Olympics. Mrs. Bonner, I didn't know you were related to the Weymouth family." "I'm Audrey's mother," I explained, feeling a sudden surge of confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Randall said loudly, addressing the crowd, "we are fortunate to have among us today Agatha Bonner, one of the finest teachers at Southaven High School. Mrs. Bonner has raised a generation of successful professionals, including my son. I propose a toast to education." The guests raised their glasses. I noticed Audrey looking at me, a mixture of surprise, pride, and concern on her face. Lawrence, on the other hand, looked as if he'd been punched in the butt. He recovered quickly and tried to take the initiative. "Of course, my mother-in-law is a wonderful teacher. We're very proud of her. It was just a little family joke that got out of hand." "Agatha, I apologize if my tone seemed disrespectful." His apology sounded fake, but the guests seemed willing to accept it. The awkward moment had almost passed. Lawrence was already turning to continue chatting with his coworkers when I said, "No need to apologize for your tone, Lawrence. You should apologize for calling me a free maid. It's not the first time, is it?" There was silence again. Lawrence froze, his face flushed. "Agatha," he hissed through his teeth, "I think we'd better talk about this at home." "I think we've been quiet enough about it," I replied calmly. 10 years to be exact. I watched Audrey make her way toward us through the crowd of guests, panic in her eyes. "Mom, please," she whispered, walking over. "Not now." "I'm sorry, honey," I told her, "but sometimes there comes a time when you have to stand up for yourself." Randall Kingsley, sensing the rising tension, tried to diffuse the situation. "I think we could all use some more champagne. The party goes on, friends." The guests slowly returned to their conversations, though many of them continued to cast curious glances in our direction. Lawrence grabbed my elbow and led me away toward the empty hallway leading to the restrooms. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Are you trying to ruin my career? I worked 10 years for this promotion." His face contorted with rage, but I was no longer afraid. Something changed in me the moment I made my little speech in front of all the guests. It was as if a part of me that I had lost years ago had returned. "Lawrence," I said calmly, "you are destroying your own career and your family by the way you treat people." What are you talking about? I provide for my family. I've given Audrey and the kids everything they have. Except respect, I said. You don't respect Audrey. You don't respect me. And you're teaching the kids the same thing. Lawrence looked around. The hallway was empty, but there were voices and music coming from the hall. He suddenly dropped to one knee as if adjusting a shoe and said quietly through gritted teeth, "Listen, Agatha. I apologize, okay? I had too much to drink. I said something stupid. But my career is on the line right now. Kingsley's already looking at me sideways. If you keep doing this scene, everything I've accomplished could fall apart. For the sake of Audrey and the children, please, let's forget this incident." I looked down at him, the arrogant man who had humiliated me for so many years and now was on his knees begging me not to ruin his precious reputation. "Stand up, Lawrence," I said. "You've already ruined it all by yourself. It's not your career, it's the way you treat people. Today I'm cutting you out of my life." He stared at me in disbelief. "What does that mean?" "It means I won't take your insults anymore. I won't pretend everything's okay when you call me a free maid. I won't be silent when you teach my grandchildren disrespect. You can't just go and—" "I can," I interrupted him. "And I'm doing it right now. I'll keep in touch with Audrey and the kids, but you're out of my life." "Audrey will never go against me." His confidence began to return. "She depends on me." "Maybe," I agreed. "But I don't. And Lawrence, if you think tonight was unpleasant, imagine what would happen if I started telling people how you really felt about your family. Like Randall Kingsley, for example, who seems to have a great appreciation for family values, judging by the way he talks about his son." Lawrence turned even paler. Are you threatening me?" "No," I shook my head. "I'm just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. We both know who you really are, Lawrence. And now Randall Kingsley is starting to guess." Before he could answer, Audrey came up to us, her face a look of extreme concern. "What's going on?" she asked, shifting her gaze from me to her husband. "Lawrence, why are you on your knees?" "My shoelace came undone," he said quickly, rising. "We were just talking to your mother. It's all right." "Mom?" Audrey turned to me. I smiled at her. "It's fine, honey. We were just clearing some things up. Where are the children?" "At our table with Winston Kingsley. He's showing them some napkin tricks. They're thrilled." "They are?" Lawrence is instantly transformed. "We should join them. It's a great opportunity to strengthen ties." He quickly headed back into the hall, leaving Audrey and me behind. "What did you say to him?" my daughter asked quietly. I'd never seen him so shocked. "The truth," I answered simply. "That I would never let him disrespect me again, and that I'm worried about you and the children." Audrey sighed. "Mom, you don't understand. Lawrence, he can be difficult, but he cares about us, in his own way. Caring without respect isn't caring, dear. It's control." She didn't answer, but I could see that my words had touched something deep inside her. "We'd better get back," she said at last. "Otherwise, he'll be even angrier." We went back into the hall. Lawrence was already sitting at the head table, talking animatedly with Winston and Randall. The children were indeed with them. Sylvia was sitting on Winston's lap, who was showing her how to make a swan out of a napkin. "See?" Audrey whispered. "It's getting better. Please, Mom, let's just spend this evening quietly." I nodded and headed for the table. As I passed Lawrence, I noticed him tense up, but he continued to smile and talk as if nothing had happened. The evening continued. Toasts were toasted, gourmet food was served, and soft music played. On the surface, everything looked fine. A successful company honoring its best employees, families rejoicing in their accomplishments. But I knew that underneath that glossy surface, something had fractured and would never be the same again. And strangely enough, that thought brought me relief rather than anxiety. I had cut Lawrence out of my life, and that was only the beginning. The drive back from the banquet was passed in oppressive silence. The children, tired from the late evening, dozed off in the back seat. Lawrence drove the car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, his face a mask of restrained anger. Audrey sat beside him, casting worried glances at her husband and me over her shoulder. I stared out the window at the lights of South Haven passing by, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and relief. Something had ended today and something had begun. As we pulled up in front of my daughter's house, Lawrence braked sharply. "Wake the kids up," he said to Audrey. "I'll get the door." He got out of the car, slammed the door loudly, and headed toward the house. Audrey quietly woke the kids, and I helped them out of the car. "Grandma, are you coming to our house?" Sylvia asked sleepily. "No, honey, I have to go home," I replied. "It's getting late." "Stay, Mom," Audrey said suddenly. Her eyes were almost panic-stricken. "It's late, and tomorrow's Saturday, and you're in no hurry." I knew that she was afraid to be alone with Lawrence after today's incident, but I also realized that my presence would only make things worse. "No, darling," I said softly. "I really should go home. Call me tomorrow, okay?" Audrey nodded, but she looked completely lost. I put my arms around her and whispered, "It's going to be okay. You're stronger than you think." She smiled weakly and led the kids into the house. I decided to call a cab. It was really late to walk, and my heels didn't make for a long walk. At home, the first thing I did was to take off my shoes and put the kettle on. Despite the late hour, sleep didn't come. Too many thoughts were swirling in my head. I pondered what would happen now, after my open confrontation with Lawrence. How would it affect my relationship with my daughter and grandchildren? No sooner had I finished my tea than the doorbell rang. Lawrence stood on the doorstep, his face contorted with anger. "You!" he almost shouted. "You deliberately tried to humiliate me in front of the boss, in front of the whole company. I didn't invite him in, I just stood in the doorway. Lawrence, it's late. If you want to talk, let's do it tomorrow when you're sober." "I am perfectly sober." He stepped forward, forcing me to retreat into the house. "Do you realize what you've done?" Kingsley was looking at me differently now. I saw the look in his eyes. 10 years of work, and it could all be ruined because of your antics. My prank? I felt the anger I'd felt in the restaurant return. "You publicly called me a free maid, in front of all your coworkers, in front of my grandchildren. It was a joke." He waved his hands. "You're exaggerating." "It wasn't a joke, Lawrence. You've been saying these things to me for years. And today I decided I'd had enough." He went into the living room and collapsed into the chair Thomas liked to sit in. For some reason, that hurt me even more. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Money? I can give you money if you need it. Just stop this war." "I don't want your money," I replied. "I want respect. For myself, for Audrey, for the kids. I respect my family." He raised his voice again. "I work my ass off to provide them with everything they need. Respect isn't just material provision, Lawrence. It's an attitude. The way you talk to a person, how you listen, how you value his opinion and feelings." He snorted. "That's all sentimental nonsense. In the real world, only results matter. And I provide them." "At the cost of what?" I asked. "Audrey's afraid of you. The kids see how you treat me and they learn to do the same. Audrey is happy. She has everything a woman could dream of. Except a voice in her own family." We looked at each other across the room. Two people who will never understand each other. "I won't argue with you anymore," he finally said. "Just tell me what you want so that you can forget this incident and not make trouble." "I already told you in the restaurant," I replied calmly. "I'm cutting you out of my life. I'm not coming over to help with the housework anymore. I won't cook for you. I won't take your insults." "And Audrey? The kids?" His eyes narrowed. "I still want to see them, but on neutral ground. Here or in the park or somewhere else. Without you." "You can't just cut me off from the kids like that." He jumped out of his chair. "I'm their father." "I'm not cutting you off from the children, Lawrence. I'm cutting myself off from you. Big difference." He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Look, Agatha, let's be reasonable. The kids need you, and Audrey. They're used to your help. And you're used to a free maid," I finished for him. "But that's not going to happen anymore. If Audrey needs my help, I'm here for her. But I will no longer cross the threshold of a house where you are present." Lawrence stared at me, his face flushed. "You will regret it," he said quietly. "Audrey will never go against me. You'll lose your daughter and your grandchildren." Maybe. I felt a stab of pain at the thought, but I didn't show it. but I won't lose myself again. He headed for the door but stopped at the threshold. This isn't over, he said. You'll be back again, begging for forgiveness. After he left, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at my phone, waiting for Audrey to call. It never came. In the morning, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of freedom. Despite the anxiety for my daughter and grandchildren, despite the uncertainty of the future, I felt I had finally regained control of my life. I decided not to call Audrey first. She needed time to sort out the situation without my pressure. Instead, I busied myself with the house, which had long needed attention. Thomas had always overseen all the minor repairs, and since his death, a lot of things had fallen into disrepair. Around noon, the bell rang. I expected to hear Audrey, but it was Winston Kingsley. Mrs. Bonner, it's Winston. I'm not sure if you remember me. Of course I remember you, Winston, I replied. You were one of my best students. Copper sulfate, remember? He laughed. That project changed my life. After it, I decided to study chemistry in college. Then I went into business to join my father's company, though. What can I do for you, Winston? Actually, I was thinking maybe we could get together and talk after yesterday. I have some questions. I agreed to meet, and an hour later we were sitting in a small cafe in downtown Southaven. Winston had grown into a tall young man with confident manners, but in his eyes I could still see that inquisitive boy who asked the most interesting questions in chemistry class. Minus Mr. Weymouth. Does he always treat you like that? Winston asked after an exchange of pleasantries. I appreciated his candor. Unfortunately, yes, for years. But why did you put up with it? There was genuine bewilderment in his voice. For my daughter and grandchildren, I answered simply. Sometimes we do things we would never do for ourselves, for those we love. He nodded, understanding. You know, my father was surprised. Not so much by your reaction, but by Weymouth's behavior. He always seemed so impeccable at work. A lot of people wear masks, Winston, especially at work. Yeah, but in the case of Weymouth, he hesitated. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it. Is there something wrong with his work? I asked bluntly. Winston looked around, as if checking to see if anyone was eavesdropping. His promotion was a controversial decision, he said finally. His performance is excellent, the best in the department, but there are doubts about his methods. What kind of doubts? You see, the insurance business is built on trust. We promise our customers protection in difficult situations, but the company must also make money. It's a delicate balance. I nodded, encouraging him to continue. There's a suspicion that Weymouth, well, let's just say he doesn't always act in the best interests of his clients, especially older people who aren't good with the details of policies. He's undercharging? I guessed. It's hard to prove. Winston lowered his voice. But yes, it's a suspicion. He's very good at finding loopholes in the terms of contracts that minimize payouts. Technically, it's not necessarily a violation of the law, but it's a breach of trust, I finished for him. Exactly. My father's concerned about these rumors. The company's reputation is paramount to him. But there is no direct evidence, only isolated complaints from customers, which can be explained by their misunderstanding of the terms of the contract. I've been thinking. What Winston was telling me was in keeping with Lawrence as I knew him, a man for whom the end always justified the means. Why are you telling me this, Winston? He looked embarrassed. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe because you've always taught us honesty. Remember your rule? There is no room for deception in science, even if the result of an experiment is not what you expected. I smiled, touched that he remembered that. Or maybe, he continued, I feel I should help you in some way after seeing the way you've been treated. You deserve better than that, Mrs. Bonner. Thank you, Winston. I covered his hand with mine. You grew up to be a good man. After meeting Winston, I decided to act. But not in the way Lawrence might have expected, not from a position of revenge or spite. I decided to regain my independence. The first step was to take a part-time job as a tutor. A few years ago, when I had just retired, I had given private chemistry lessons to high school students preparing for college. This brought not only extra income, but also fun. I've always loved teaching. But after a particularly nasty comment from Lawrence at a family dinner, "You can't work at your age, you'll embarrass our family if you start," messing around with formulas. I gave it up. As usual, Audrey didn't stand up for me and I didn't want to cause trouble. Now I pulled out my old notebook and started calling people I knew. Former co-workers, parents of students. To my surprise, many people still remembered me and recommended me to their acquaintances. Mrs. Bonner, this is Deborah Finch, Emily's mom. Do you remember us? Of course I do, I replied. Emily must be in college by now? In medical school, Deborah said proudly. She always says your chemistry classes gave her a great foundation. I have a younger son in the penultimate grade now, and he needs help with chemistry. Are you still giving lessons? So within a few days, I had 3 students. Not too many, but enough to feel useful and increase my meager retirement income a bit. I didn't hear from Audrey for 3 days. On the 4th day, she called. Mom? Her voice sounded quiet and uncertain. How are you? I'm fine, honey, I answered. And you? The kids? We're, getting by, she paused. Lawrence is very upset. He says you were deliberately trying to undermine his authority in front of his boss. Do you believe that? Pause again. I don't know what to think, Mom. It's all so confusing. Lawrence can really be, abrupt. But he provides for us, takes care of the children. Audrey, I said softly. Caring without respect is not caring. We've talked about this. I know. I could hear the tears in her voice. But what am I supposed to do? Get a divorce? Stay alone with 2 kids? We can barely make ends meet on my salary. Nobody's talking about divorce, honey. Just about setting healthy boundaries, so that you and I are respected. Lawrence says you're not coming to help with the kids in the house anymore. That's true. I can't be in the same house with a man who treats me like a servant. But I will always be there for you and the children. You can come and see me anytime you want. Mom, please. She sounded pleading in her voice. Let's forget this incident. Lawrence promised not to call you again, you know. He was drunk, excited about the promotion. Alcohol is no excuse, Audrey. It doesn't create new thoughts, only releases the ones already inside. I heard her crying quietly on the other end of the line. The children need a grandmother, she said through her tears. Sylvia asks about you every day. I told you I'll always be there for them. They can come to me. I can pick them up from school, walk with them in the park. But I will not cross the threshold of a house where Lawrence is present. He'd never agree to the children coming to you without us. Then you can come with them, without him. There's a long pause again. I don't know if I can. He'd be against it. Think about it, honey. You're a grown woman, a mother of 2. You have the right to make your own decisions. After talking to Audrey, I felt both sadness and determination. Sadness at realizing how deeply my daughter was mired in an unhealthy relationship, and determination to help her, even if it meant pulling away for a while. In the days that followed, I was fully immersed in working with my new students. Teaching had always brought me joy, and I found that I could still explain complex concepts clearly despite my age. My students seemed to appreciate my expertise and methodical approach. You explain so much more clearly than our high school teacher, Mrs. Bonner, Jason, one of the new students, told me. Now I finally understand these redox reactions. Moments like this reminded me why I chose a career in teaching. Not for the money or status, but for those moments of insight in a student's eyes when the complicated suddenly becomes clear. On the 6th day after the banquet, the unexpected happened. I was working in the garden, weeding the bed of roses that Thomas loved so much, when I heard children's voices. When I looked up, I saw Audrey, Noel, and Sylvia standing at the gate. Grandmother! Sylvia rushed to me as soon as I opened the gate. We missed you so much! I hugged my granddaughter, feeling my heart ache with joy and anxiety at the same time. Hi, Grandma, Noel said more reservedly, but I could see that he was happy to see me too. Audrey looked haggard, with circles under her eyes, but determined. We decided to come and see you, she said. Lawrence is at work tonight. Come on in, I invited them into the house. I was just about to make lemonade. While the children scattered around the house, Sylvia went to look at the collection of porcelain figurines on the shelf, and Noel turned on the old TV. Audrey and I were alone in the kitchen. I didn't think you were coming, I said, pulling lemons out of the refrigerator. Neither did I, she smiled weakly. But after our conversation, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how Lawrence feels about you, and about me. I sliced lemons in silence, giving her a chance to talk. I signed up for a refresher course, she said suddenly. Accounting. They're online in the evenings when the kids are asleep. Audrey, that's wonderful. I was genuinely excited. When do you start? I already started. 2 days ago. Lawrence doesn't know yet. Yeah, I'm afraid of his reaction. I put the knife aside and turned to my daughter. He has no right to stop you from learning and growing. I know, but he controls all of our finances. The card I use is linked to his account. He can see every transaction. How did you pay for the course? She lowered her eyes. I sold the earrings you gave me for my 20th birthday. I felt a stab of pain. The earrings were a family heirloom. I got them from my mother and she got them from hers. Audrey, you could have just asked me for the money. I didn't want to be a burden, she said quietly. You do so much for us already. We were silent for a moment, both of us thinking about the situation. What do you plan to do next? I finally asked. I don't know, she sighed. This course is the first step. Maybe after that I can get a better job, be more independent financially. That's a good plan, I agreed. And the kids? Have you talked to them about the situation? A little. Sylvia just missed you and didn't understand why we weren't coming. Noel, he's asking more questions. He heard what happened at the banquet. He saw his father yelling at home afterward. Lawrence yelled at you? I was worried. Not just at me, at the walls, at the TV, at the world. She tried to smile, but it came out sad. He was furious. Said you'd ruined his reputation, that Kingsley looked at him differently now. Is that true? I don't know. But he's really worried about it. He's always checking his email, waiting for some important message from his boss. I remembered what Winston had told me about Lawrence's questionable work practices. Perhaps the incident at the banquet had drawn unwanted attention to his activities. Mom, can I ask you something? Audrey looked uncertain. Of course, dear. Do you ever regret marrying Daddy? That you tied your life to one man? The question caught me off guard. Never, I answered honestly. Your father was a kind, intelligent, respectful man. We were partners in everything. Sure, we had hard times, arguments, but we always resolved them together with respect for each other. I don't remember you ever yelling at each other, Audrey said thoughtfully. Because we didn't yell. We talked. Audrey nodded, considering my words. I want the kids to have a normal childhood, she said quietly. I want them to see healthy relationships, to respect themselves and others. That's a worthy goal. I squeezed her hand gently. And I'll help you in any way I can. We finished making the lemonade and called the kids in. The rest of the day passed in a rare peace and joy for the last few years. We played board games, I showed Sylvia how to bake cookies, and I helped Noel with his science homework. Occasionally, I noticed Audrey watching us with a sad smile, as if she saw something missing from her normal life with Lawrence. When it was time to leave, Lawrence had to be home from work by 6. Audrey hugged me tightly. Thank you, Mom, for everything. You're stronger than you think, I repeated the words I'd said to her a few days ago. And I'm always on your side. As they walked down the street, Sylvia skipping ahead, Noel walking a little farther away, absorbed in his own thoughts, and Audrey straightening her shoulders with renewed determination. I felt mixed emotions, anxiety for their future, pride in my daughter's first steps toward independence, and a strange sense of freedom that came with my decision to no longer endure the humiliation. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a small coffee shop called Morning Dawn across from Patricia Donovan, my former colleague who had taught English literature at our school and had retired 3 years before me. Despite her age, she remained active in the town community, running a book club at the library and serving on the South Haven Senior Citizens Council. It's good to see you in shape, Agatha, she said, stirring her tea. After Thomas died, you seemed to disappear from the life of the town. I've been busy with my daughter's family, I replied. But now, it was time to get back to my own life. I told her about the situation with Lawrence, omitting the most unpleasant details, but making her understand the nature of the problem. It's terrible, Patricia shook her head. But unfortunately, it's not uncommon. Many of us older people face disrespect, especially from younger relatives. It's not just disrespect. I lowered my voice. I have reason to believe that Lawrence uses questionable methods in his work, especially when it comes to elderly clients. Patricia stepped forward. Are you talking about the Exeter Insurance Company? It's interesting that you mentioned it. At the last Senior Citizens Council meeting, several people complained about that very company. Small payouts, denials for dubious reasons. Could you introduce me to those people? I asked. I'm not going to start a scandal or a lawsuit. I just want to understand what's going on. Patricia hesitated, tapping her spoon on the rim of her cup. You know Vivian Ashley? She lives on Maple Street, in the little blue house. I shook my head. I don't think we know each other. She's 82 years old, a widow, former nurse. 6 months ago, a pipe burst in her bathroom, flooded the entire first floor. The insurance only covered a fraction of the repairs, although the contract was supposed to cover much more. She's still furious. And I understand her. It's hard to make ends meet on her pension, let alone make repairs. And her insurer is Exeter? Yes, and if I'm not mistaken, it was your brother-in-law who took out her policy. She mentioned the name Lawrence. I felt my insides tighten. Winston was right in his suspicions. Could you give me her address? I'd like to talk to her. The next day, I stood on the doorstep of a neat blue house on Maple Street. Vivian Ashley appeared to be an energetic older woman with short gray hair and shrewd blue eyes. When I introduced myself and explained the purpose of my visit, she immediately invited me in. Agatha Bonner, she interjected, seating me in the living room. You taught my grandson Brandon. He's an engineer in Boston now. Brandon Ashley, I remembered the tall guy with the freckles. He was a great student, especially in lab work. Vivian smiled, but her smile faded quickly when the conversation turned to the insurance case. I never thought I would have to face such a fraud at my age, she said, pulling out a file folder. When the accident happened, I immediately called the company. An appraiser came, looked at the damage, said everything would be covered. Then this Weymouth guy came in, your son-in-law, as you say, and everything changed. What exactly happened? I asked, listening intently. He found some clause in the contract, some loophole. He said that since the pipe had burst because of corrosion, and not because of an external impact, the insurance only covered 30% of the damage. Did you sign any additional documents? Yeah, he gave me some kind of form. He said it was standard procedure to speed up the payment. I signed it without reading it. My eyesight wasn't what it used to be, and the font was small. I asked to see all the documents, both the original policy and the additional forms. Chemistry was my specialty, not law, but years of teaching had taught me to read and analyze texts carefully. Plus, as an older person, I had experienced my own attempts at fraud and had learned to be attentive to detail. Looking through the papers, I noticed inconsistencies. The original policy clearly stated that the insurance covered any water damage, including pipe leaks, regardless of cause. But the supplemental form that Vivian had signed had a clause agreeing to adjust the payment in accordance with Section 12B of the main contract, a section that, in the original policy, dealt with an entirely different matter. Vivian, I think you've been misled, I said gently. This form you signed actually canceled part of your coverage, although it was presented as a mere formality. Vivian's eyes widened. Are you sure? But how could he? Unfortunately, it's a common practice, presenting a complex legal document as a mere formality, especially to older people who may not understand the details. What am I supposed to do? There was desperation in her voice. The renovation is already completed. I've spent almost all my savings. I wondered. I could advise her to consult a lawyer, but litigation with insurance companies rarely ends in favor of clients, especially if there is a signature on the document, albeit obtained fraudulently. Vivian, will you let me get copies of those documents? I have a contact at Exeter Insurance. Perhaps we can settle this matter out of court. After meeting with Vivian, I contacted 2 other elderly Exeter clients that Patricia had mentioned. The stories were similar. Complicated documents signed without full understanding, underpayments, and Lawrence's name was everywhere. After gathering enough information, I called Winston Kingsley and asked for a meeting with his father. He arranged it for the following week. Randall Kingsley received me in his office in the main office of Exeter Insurance. It was an imposing room overlooking the river, the walls decorated with diplomas and awards. Mrs. Bonner, he stood up to greet me. Winston says you have important information for me. Yes, Mr. Kingsley, it's about your employee, Lawrence Weymouth. I summarized the facts I'd gathered, showed copies of documents. Randall listened intently, his face growing more and more serious. These are serious allegations, Mrs. Bonner, he said when I finished. If what you say is confirmed, it's not only a violation of company policy, it's potentially illegal. I understand the gravity of the situation, I replied. And I want to emphasize that my goal is not to ruin Lawrence's career or hurt your company. I simply believe that elderly clients deserve to be treated fairly. Randall nodded. I appreciate your position, and especially that you came directly to me rather than to the regulators or the press. Exeter's reputation has been built for decades on customer trust. What do you intend to do? I'm going to conduct an internal investigation. If the facts are confirmed, we'll take appropriate action. Can I keep these copies? Sure, I handed him the folder. And one more request. Could we review the case of Vivian Ashley? She spent her life savings on repairs that her insurance should have covered. Randall thought for a moment. I will personally review her case. And if it's as you describe, the company will reimburse her for the difference. I left the Exeter office with a sense of accomplishment. Not revenge, not gloating, just justice. As a teacher, I've always strived to instill in my students the understanding that actions have consequences and dishonesty doesn't pay off in the end. A week later, I got a call from Vivian. Agatha, you're not going to believe this. I got a call from Randall Kingsley himself. They've reconsidered my case and are refunding the full amount they underpaid, plus interest. I'm very happy for you, Vivian, I replied sincerely. He mentioned that they were doing some kind of internal investigation and that you played an important part in it. Thank you, Agatha. You're a real guardian angel for us old people. That same evening, Audrey called. I could tell by the sound of her voice that something was wrong. Mom, do you know anything about what's going on at Lawrence's company? She asked without preamble. What's going on? I decided to be careful. He's been called into management. Some kind of investigation about work practices. He came home in a rage, screaming that he'd been set up, that it was all because of that incident at the banquet. Did he mention me? Yes, Audrey said quietly. He's convinced that you had something to do with it, but that's not true, is it, Mom? I paused, thinking about the answer. Audrey, I did talk to Mr. Kingsley, but not about Lawrence per se. I was talking about elderly clients who feel they've been cheated out of their payments. It was my civic stance, not a personal vendetta. Oh my God, Audrey sighed heavily. He's furious. He says he might be stripped of his promotion. I'm sorry if it's causing problems for you and the kids. But Audrey, think about it. If these allegations are unfounded, why is the company investigating? Why is Lawrence so concerned? She was silent for a long time. I don't know, Mom. It's all so confusing. But I want you to know that the children miss you, and so do I. I'm always here for you. You can come anytime. I know you can. We'll come Sunday, okay? Lawrence will be in a meeting with a lawyer. On Sunday, Audrey and the children came early in the morning. We spent a beautiful day together, making pancakes for breakfast, walking in the park, playing board games. I've noticed that Audrey seems more relaxed away from home and her husband, and the kids are just happy to be with me. How are your classes going? I asked when the kids were engrossed in playing in the garden. Good, she smiled. I've already passed 2 modules. The teacher says I have an aptitude for analytical accounting. That's wonderful. You've always been a smart girl. Remember how you always got straight A's in math in school? I do. She looked thoughtfully out the window at the children playing. You know, Mom, I applied for a new position. At Maryland Construction, they're looking for a chief accountant. Audrey! I couldn't hide my surprise and joy. That's a huge step forward. I haven't heard back yet, she added quickly. And I'm not sure I'm ready, but I thought I'd give it a try. I'm proud of you. I hugged her tightly. Whatever happens, you've already taken a big step. Lawrence doesn't know, she said quietly. I don't know how he'll react if I get the job, especially now that he's in trouble at work. You're a grown woman, Audrey, a mother of 2. You're entitled to your own career. She nodded, but there was still uncertainty in her eyes. 3 days later, Winston Kingsley called me. Mrs. Bonner, I thought you might be interested in the results of the investigation, he said. Dad didn't fire Weymouth because there wasn't enough evidence to make such a big deal out of it. But he did take away his promotion and his bonus, and he gave him a stern warning. One false move and he'd lose his job. Thank you for letting me know, Winston, I replied. And how did Lawrence take the decision? Not very well. I could hear the irony in Winston's voice. But he had no choice. His father also ordered that all his future insurance claims be subject to additional scrutiny. So now his hands are tied. After that conversation, I didn't hear any news about Lawrence for about 2 weeks. Audrey came over with the kids every Sunday but avoided talking about her husband, and I didn't insist. I could see that she needed time to sort out her feelings and decide what to do next. And then, one beautiful spring day, she came to me with a shining face. Mom, I got the job, chief accountant at Maryland Construction. Audrey, that's amazing. I hugged her. When do you start? Next month. The salary is almost double what it is now, and flexible hours, which is great with kids. And Lawrence, does he know? Her face darkened a little. Yeah, I told him last night. He, wasn't thrilled. At first he tried to forbid it, said it would affect the kids, that I couldn't handle it. But then when I told him about the paycheck, it was like he thought about it, especially now that he's been robbed of his bonus and his raise. Does he still blame me? Yes, she sighed, but not so vehemently anymore. He's more focused on regaining trust in the company. He's quieter, more cautious. What about the kids? Noel's changed. After that incident at the banquet, it's like he's seen his father in a new light. And you too. He no longer repeats the disrespectful phrases he learned from Lawrence. And the other day, he even stood up for Sylvia when Lawrence yelled at her for spilling juice. I felt a surge of pride in my grandson. Perhaps he had learned an important lesson about what real respect is. Gradually, our Sunday meetings became a tradition. Audrey and the children would come in the morning. We would make lunch together, talk, laugh. It was a special time, free from the stress they still felt at home. One day, when Audrey had been in her new position for a month, I noticed a change in her. She was more confident, had a straighter back, smiled more often. We were sitting in the garden watching the children play with the neighbor's puppy. You know, Mom, she said suddenly, I'm thinking about starting to save money, my own savings. That's a wise decision, I approved. Lawrence doesn't know. He still controls our joint account. But with my new paycheck, I can slowly put some of it away in a separate account. You're thinking about... I didn't finish the sentence, not wanting to push her. Divorce? She finished it for me. I don't know. Sometimes I do. But more often, I just want to have a choice. To know that I can walk away if I want to, that I won't be stuck because of financial dependency. I hugged her, feeling proud of her determination and strength. That's the right thing to do, honey. To always have a choice is freedom. By the end of the summer, our Sunday lunches had become an integral part of life. Sometimes Audrey would bring the children on other days, when Lawrence was on a business trip or working late. Our home became a refuge for them, a place where they could be themselves without fear of judgment or criticism. One such day, as we were all sitting around the table, Sylvia suddenly asked, Grandma, why doesn't Daddy ever come with us to your house? I looked over to Audrey, not knowing what to say. Dad and Grandma, they have different ways of looking at life, Audrey said carefully. Sometimes adults can't get along. But you said the family should be together, Sylvia insisted. There are different kinds of family, honey, I said. And the important thing is that people respect each other and are kind to each other. Daddy wasn't nice to you, Noel said suddenly. I heard him call you bad words. Noel, Audrey pulled him back. It's all right. I put my hand on my grandson's shoulder. You're right, Noel. Your dad wasn't always nice to me. And I've decided I don't want to take any more unkindness. But that doesn't mean you have to choose between us. You can love us both. He nodded, hesitating. I prefer to be here, he said at last. It's calmer here. In early fall, one cool Sunday afternoon, Audrey and the kids came over for lunch as usual. We cooked a roast, one of the kids' favorite meals, and apple pie for dessert. After lunch, Audrey was helping me with the dishes when she suddenly said, "Lawrence knows we're here every Sunday. He never says it outright, but I can see him looking at his watch as we're about to leave. Has he tried to stop you?" Nunip too. I think he realizes that if he tries, it will only make things worse, especially now that I'm more financially independent. When it was time to leave, I walked them to the door. We hugged goodbye, and Audrey and the kids walked down the street to their house, which was only a 15-minute walk away. I was standing on the doorstep, waving to them, when I noticed a familiar figure in the window of the house across the street. Lawrence. He was standing there watching his family return from a dinner he hadn't been invited to. Our gazes met across the street. In his eyes, I saw a mixture of anger and defeat. In that moment, I realized that I had completely cut him out of my life. Not with hatred or a thirst for revenge, but with the quiet realization that some people just don't deserve a place in our lives. I closed the door, symbolically cutting him off from my world, and returned to a house that was once again filled with life and laughter thanks to Sunday lunches with Audrey and the kids. Perhaps Audrey would never decide to divorce. Perhaps Lawrence would never change his attitude toward people. But I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer a free maid. I was Agatha Bonner, a respected teacher, a loving mother and grandmother, a woman who found the strength to stand up for her dignity. And that was what mattered most.